Good Monday morning, everyone. It is January 3rd. Welcome to the Morning Medical Update. Welcome to the first show of 2022. Hope everyone had a great new year. We are sure glad to be back and glad you are with us as well. Coming up today, we talk about the need for pregnant women to get the vaccine. They are considered high risk when it comes to COVID, having a much greater chance of ending up in the ICU and on a ventilator. Not to mention the stress that it puts on a baby when mom is fighting to breathe and in many cases fighting for her own life. Today, we meet a couple who experienced all of this. They were not vaccinated at the time. They are expecting a baby, and they admit now they wish they would have taken the shot. You're going to hear from them coming up today. Make sure to get your questions sent in to us early here on YouTube and Facebook and the Medical News Network. You can find links to those right here on your screen. Before we get into our topic today, let's get to our COVID numbers. How did we do over the holiday weekend? Dr. Hawkinson, good morning to you.
Yeah, hi. It's good to be back. It's not good to be back because of COVID. It's just good to be back.
It is.
Unfortunately, COVID is still with us. Our numbers have creeped up a little bit. Again, remember, in this number that we're talking about with acute infections, sometimes it'll go down and up because of discharges and new admissions. You know, we've kind of really creeped up from those mid-60s or high 60s that we saw before we left or last week when we did the Wednesday shows. But now we're up to 73 active infections, 20 in the ICU, 14 on the ventilator, and 35 in that recovery period still. So, we have over 108 patients. And of those 73 active infections, only 5 are fully vaccinated.
All right, good to have everyone back. And Dr. Stites, good morning to you.
Good morning. That's a lot of numbers, though, right? Because the problem is we're still seeing an escalation in numbers. We have over 500 employees out, and that's a big number, too. And they're both on isolation and people who are quarantined and people who have had COVID. So I think, it's a challenge because I suspect in our area we have a mix of Delta and Omicron. I've seen some things that are speculating we're probably about 45% Delta and 55% or 60% Omicron. And I suspect that's where we're headed. And now that we've had the New Year's Eve, we're still seeing our numbers escalate here and across the country. What we want to hope for Omicron is a little bit of the South African experience. This is a slide that was pulled from the New York Times. Notice that, and this is the number of new positive cases in South Africa. And what you can see on this slide is the rapid uptick. Look at the slope of the curve, and then look at how fast it's dropping. And look at how narrow that peak is. And that's what people are interested in with the Omicron. It seems to go and spike really high, and almost as rapidly it seems to disappear. What we're going to hope is that's our story, and that in the meantime, it may push Delta a little bit out of the way and won't result in as much hospitalization and death. The problem is that when you have that many cases all at once, you're probably going to see a lot of hospitalizations. Even if it has a lower risk of being hospitalized, because you get so many people sick, you'll still have a lot of hospitalizations. Hopefully we won't see as much death with that or severe hospitalizations need for mechanical ventilation and intubation.
And are those hospitalizations from Delta, since we know that Omicron has less symptoms?
I think the ones that we have in the hospital right now are logically more from Delta. Now, we are doing genetic analysis on all of those, but we know what the distribution is in the community. We also know that, for us, Thanksgiving was really a Delta event, right? Mm-hmm. And so what we know is that about 2 to 4 weeks after a major gathering like that is when we start seeing a challenge. And indeed, that's exactly when our numbers started to rise. So I think our hospitalization numbers are more driven by Delta, although increasingly there's probably a mix. I think our ICU and ventilator numbers are really still driven by Delta. We'll see what happens in coming weeks. Hopefully we'll see those begin to drop off as Omicron pushes Delta a little bit out of the way in terms of transmissibility, which is that's sort of the South African, even the European experience. And early results from the United Kingdom are kind of showing a similar pattern. So we'll see how that works and plays in the U.S.
So Omicron pushing out Delta, that's why it's important to differentiate between the two and
it is.
Find out
I think
that data.
It is. I think it's important, just more of an epidemiological story. Mm-hmm. The therapies and the treatments are largely the same. The other thing but the problems we don't know yet is South Africa has a very young population relative to the United States. Our average age is about 10 or 15 years older than South Africa. But secondly, and I think this is really important, what we don't know is what's going to happen in our nursing homes, where vaccination rate was high initially. But two things. A, the staff aren't as well vaccinated. They're about 65% vaccinated. But B, neither the staff nor the residents have been that well boosted yet. And until they get fully boosted, and we heard that from Jessica Calendar-Rich last Wednesday, until people are fully boosted, they're really not as protected. And the fear being that two things. A, if there's an outbreak in a nursing home where staff are out, then we can't discharge patients to a nursing home. So that backs up hospitals even more. B, people who are vulnerable may be in the hospital and still get really sick from the Omicron variant. And that's part of what we just don't know. Hawk, I mean, we don't really know how Omicron's going to behave yet here in the United States.
No, I mean, certainly we hear about R0s and numbers like that and transmission. Again, there's a large component of human behavior to any transmission studies, and we know that if you are going out to gatherings in those situations, you are likely going to have the ability to transmit it to others than if you are at home isolated from other people. So that's important to know. And really, Steve, you know, from what we've seen from the variants, from the original ancestral Wuhan strain that they made the spike to, now through all the variants, what we have seen is that really these viruses are the same. Clinically, the clinical spectrum is the same. There may be some variations and maybe a higher risk of hospitalization with Delta as compared to Alpha, or less of a hospitalization risk as compared Omicron to Delta, but these are really the same viruses. They cause the same spectrum of disease. And I think more importantly, what we have seen in the benefits and early data also out of South Africa, which would show that the vaccines do work. And although what we have seen is if you get that boost, you have maybe a boost in those neutralizing antibodies to Omicron where they weren't really detectable before, but now after getting that third or fourth dose, you now have detectable antibodies. That's probably the same for variants we haven't even recognized yet. We're just not testing for that. But also that early data showing that those T-cell responses continue to hold up to those people infected with Omicron. So I think, again, the story continues to be vaccination. These viruses, whatever variants, are very similar. There is maybe a spectrum of differences. But as far as the clinical disease and what they cause, just as you said, we know that the original Wuhan, your risk of hospitalization was low, but when you have so many people being infected, and if you see that infection curve, that case curve on New York Times or Washington Post, you see how dramatic that is. And so with that spike in infections, you have to understand that even if it's a small percentage who are going to the hospital, which, by the way, is going to be larger if you are unvaccinated, your chance of going to the hospital. But when you have that large spike in cases, you have to assume that even a small percentage is going to be a large number.
Yeah, we know that from both the European data already and the Israeli data that the people who are going to the hospital in the Omicron surge are the unvaccinated. The other thing is, it may be a new year, it may be 2022, but guess what? The rules of infection control still travel with you. They still keep you safe wherever you go. Keep your distance, wear your mask, don't go out if you're sick, and get yourself vaccinated. To your point, Hawkeye, it still looks really effective, both B-cell and T-cell immunity, especially that T-cell immunity with Omicron. And I think we can't say anything probably better than that vaccination is still the way out of the crisis. And though there's some new therapies coming out, we know that remdesivir now for outpatients may also lower hospitalization and death, Hawk.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the key here is with any of these antivirals is using it early in disease as well. So, we are working on those systems to be able to do that should that need arise if you're at high risk of hospitalization. And also we are hoping to be able to use some of these new oral antiviral pills as well.
So sotrovimab, Paxlovid, molnupiravir, now remdesivir. I mean, really we're getting an array of outpatient therapy that's really effective. Here's the one thing to be aware of, though. If you're not vaccinated and you get COVID, you're at the much higher risk of being in the ICU and ventilators. You know what hasn't gotten better there? ICU medicine hasn't changed in the last 2 years. No. Outcomes may be a little better, but it's not moved along. The key is on prevention and early therapy. And the way to avoid the whole darn thing, and the way to avoid an ICU stay altogether, is to be vaccinated. The evidence is overwhelmingly clear that vaccination continues to prevent serious hospitalization and death, even with Omicron.
Let's check and see if we have any reporters on the line today.
Can we talk a little bit about Chief Cincinnati and the officiating and dropped passes? Is that part of the
that could
is that
take
part
all
of the
day.
program too? It could take me for a while.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that all you have to say
Hi,
about that?
Heather Hollingsworth with the Associated Press. Can you talk to me about these staff absences? 500 seems really alarmingly high. How do you deal with that?
Well, we have over 13,500 employees, so the rate is pretty much what it is out in the community. And the answer is we're doing our best to keep everything going. That's our job. We still continue to provide the best care to our patients.
And these aren't 500 COVID positive. These are people out with tests.
Yeah,
Explain that.
yeah, you bet. These are people who may have had an exposure and have to be tested. We still follow the CDC guidelines around that, and we're waiting on test results. And actually, the numbers are starting to come down. That is actually an encouraging sign, just to say. One of the things we know is that the South Africa data peaked very quickly. I got my fingers crossed. The fact we peaked maybe last Friday. Maybe the numbers are going to come down a little bit. We'll see. But the answer is that's a large number of folks. You're right. That's true in hospitals across the metropolitan area. And on Wednesday, we're going to have a broader conversation about that with chief medical officers throughout Kansas City and throughout the state of Kansas. I think there's a number of us on that call. They're going to talk and address what the situation is in each of our hospitals, from small community hospitals or critical access hospitals all the way to our major urban hospitals here in the Metroplex. And I think because we've been on CMO calls even last Friday, on New Year's Eve day, we had a call, and I'll tell you, we're all hit by the same issue. Lots of staff out, and I think this is an Omicron story, the high transmissibility. And the answer is, how do you take care of patients? I mean, you double down, you do the best you can, and you work your tail off. And I think our staff get all respect and kudos because they've done a great job around that.
Other questions? Okay, I think we're good. We're going to get to our community questions here in just a bit because I know they've been chomping at the bit. They missed you. They missed you, Dr. Hawkinson. I know they have lots of questions.
Yeah.
So we will get to those in just a moment. But I would love to introduce you now to a young couple that I had the joy of interviewing and telling their story. They've been married 5 years. They didn't think that they were going to be able to have a baby. They also didn't think that they were going to get COVID. But then the unexpected happened. First, a baby was on the way, but also a COVID diagnosis. Neither parent was vaccinated. Now the miracle baby that they so longed for so many years was in jeopardy. So you're going to meet them next and talk with them. But first, here's their story.
You spend all that time, just trying to put together what makes the most sense for you and what you think is going to be right.
For 27-year-old Thomas Eckler, waiting to get vaccinated just felt right at the time. But then he contracted COVID-19.
My symptoms were pretty mild. I just had the very light cough that people get.
But things really changed when his wife Holly, who was 25 weeks pregnant, also got COVID and got so sick she was put on a ventilator.
They called me late at night and they said that she was having trouble, controlling her own oxygenation and breathing. And so they said that it'd be best to put her on a ventilator.
The Ecklers had been like a lot of people. They questioned the severity of COVID.
You feel like it's being over-exaggerated.
They were hesitant about the vaccine.
I feel like it's rushed into it because of it being given emergency approval and everything.
It's scary, I didn't know which way to go and what to believe.
But it was that wake-up call when COVID hit way too close to home.
We're pregnant. This is our first kid. This is kind of a miracle child for us.
We were shocked. We were just so happy.
But now Holly was fighting for her life. She was life-flighted to the University of Kansas Health System, where doctors were almost certain they would have to deliver the baby early to save Holly. But that miracle baby they fought so hard for would have little, if any, hope of survival.
When you're the mother and you're being so severely affected by it, that's very bad for your baby.
He's got the strongest mama fighting for him.
Thomas Zoomed his wife's care team every single day. And while in the hospital, surrounded by all those nurses and doctors, Thomas used his time wisely. He took lots of notes, asked questions, listened, and learned.
I have a notebook full of everything that I talked to the doctors about.
Soon, another miracle. Holly turned a corner, and so did baby Henry.
My main concern was them doing whatever they had to do to help her come home to us and to help our baby boy come home to us.
After 7 days on the ventilator, Holly came home, this time vaccinated. So was Thomas. Holly is still recovering and struggles with her voice.
You don't want to go through this. It was an awful experience, and I'm lucky to be alive.
Their thoughts on the vaccine now?
Do it. Do anything to save your loved ones. infections.
And message to those still hesitant.
Everyday people don't see the inside of ICUs that are filled with people with COVID, or the inside of labor and delivery areas with moms that have COVID.
And you got to get vaccinated, you guys. You really do. You have to.
And welcome to the program this morning, Thomas and Holly Eckler. They are joining us from their home in Wichita, Kansas. So glad you are here with us today, healthy, doing well, and sharing your story. I know you're also joining us from what will soon be your baby's nursery, right?
Yep.
Good spot to do this interview this morning, because we're glad that you're doing good, doing well. So, Dr. Seitz, I know just to hear, we're going to talk with them a little bit, but I just wanted to bring you in when we talk about the beginning of this pandemic. So many questions around people pregnant getting the vaccine, and how people did not know, and mothers and expected parents had a lot of concerns. And then it just turned these last 6, 8, 9 months of just, you have to get vaccinated.
No, there's no question the rate of serious hospitalization and death in pregnant women from COVID-19 is much higher than it is in the general population, and for a lot of reasons that Hawkeye can explain better than I can. But the reality is that in this way, now we consider women who are pregnant healthy, except in this way,
Right.
that their immune systems seem to react a little differently, and they end up with more severe lung disease than the more standard patients, and more complications, clots, etc., and then often losing the baby. And so really, I think if you look at the groups of people who need to get vaccinated, Hawkeye, pregnant women are one of the top at the list. There's just no question. And whereas there was worry early on, there is fear now, and the only fear is if you're not vaccinated against COVID-19 when you're pregnant.
Yeah, we absolutely know, and all of those have been elucidated even more of this past year, those risks for pregnant women to suffer more risk of complication and severe disease as compared to the non-pregnant women of their same age. Vaccination continues to protect that group against those high-risk complications.
And that's the key. You look at our numbers and you say, well, sometimes 15% of your hospitalizations are vaccinated, which is true, although we lately have been running closer to 5 or 6%. So it's still really low. But if you look at our ICU population, then it's almost 98 or 99% unvaccinated. There is just no question. Nobody can question the efficacy of vaccination nor the safety of it any longer. If you do, it's just pseudoscience.
So Thomas and Holly, I just want to find out a little bit about what your thoughts were about COVID when this first came into the picture a couple of years ago. You had your doubts, you had questions, so do a lot of people, so did a lot of people. Tell us what your thoughts were back then.
Scary. We wanted to make sure that the vaccine was safe, of course, before we got it. But COVID, it never really hit home until I got it. And even like our friends, their father got it and passed away. So it really just hits home a lot quicker.
Yeah, I'd agree. And, I've worked in very close contact with large amounts of public people, like public service, for a while. And, at first, especially with how things circulate, both sides of, media or political, it didn't help that it was a huge political field at the time. But you make your decisions on it and how you look at it based off of just what you see and who you trust at the point, which it's hard to do so nowadays, especially with how many social media sources you get. But as far as how we looked at it at the beginning, what most people do, which is this is just the cold or the flu, and it's not going to have much of a difference of impact on that, which is the same kind of argument people still try to use, but it doesn't turn into that. It just hits you so much more severe. I know you were just talking about the effects on pregnant women, and a big thing that we're dealing with right now is we still might end up delivering a month early because of kidney issues that could potentially have occurred from the inflammation from this. So it's not a joke to look at.
Yeah. So what are you hearing about baby Henry? So that's kidney issues with Henry?
No, with Holly.
With Holly.
And just, they're not sure how COVID affects pregnant moms. And so right now we're looking at, potentially 3 weeks to a month early, just because one, our blood pressures are up, like possible kind of preeclampsia kind of thing. But their concern about that is the inflammation that COVID causes to your kidneys and the immune response, and the possible scarring to that. It could be potentially dangerous for her if she had to go full term if things continue to look how they are right now.
All things that we've been concerned about from the beginning of
things.
this.
And just, first of all, my heart goes out to you. You've been through a tough ordeal. I mean, this is hard. And when you guys were getting sick, the data wasn't as clear as it is now. I can sound all very high and mighty about how good the data is. But about a year ago, the vaccines weren't. But secondly, I'm so glad that you're at the position that you got out of the hospital, Holly. That's great. But good luck on the delivery. I bet things will go well, and good luck to baby Henry. It's pretty clear he's got two pretty darn determined parents, so that's awesome.
Well, and they came home and they're vaccinated. So,
Yeah,
I mean, that's the part about their
off.
story that I appreciate it. Because, Thomas, I mean, full disclosure, you texted me after we did our interview, and we had talked quite a bit. And you had said, you're not afraid to admit that you feel you really made a mistake waiting to get the vaccine. Of course, hindsight tells us everything. But Dr. Seitz, that's what I appreciate about people like this, because we're talking, we're trying to get the message out to the people who are unvaccinated and have questions. And I told them, when Thomas was telling me about all the notes that he was taking, I said, you're right. I work in between these two guys every day. It's easy for me to say I know all of my stuff and I get inundated with all this great information. But if you're sitting at home and you're getting news and media and social media.
Yeah, social media. Social media is not scientific media.
No,
right?
It is not.
It's just
there.
Media, and people put a lot of stuff out there, and you hear a lot of and here's what I would say: the sources of information. A hoax begins with the belief that someone has information that they're keeping from you, right? That they're not going to tell you the truth. It's hard to fake a worldwide crisis. I mean, it's just really hard to fake that. And it would sure be hard to not have somebody talk about the faking of it, because there's a great story there. Man, if there was a hoax, man, everybody would go out and talk about that because there's just no way to hide it. But this isn't something that's a hoax or you can hide. The good news is that 83% of Americans over the age of 18, and I think even down to the age of 12 now, have all gotten their first dose of vaccination, which is great. But I'll turn to Thomas and Holly and say, they got to complete their vaccine, right? And hopefully you guys have already got your boosters too, right?
Yeah, we're not at the date that we can do that yet because we've only been out of the hospital like 2 weeks now. But
okay, fair enough.
This week, I think tomorrow's our booster shot. So
excellent. And that that's part of the story, especially with Omicron, Hawkeye. You want to complete the series. Don't stop with one or two. Get all three as soon as you're eligible. That is, get your two, and then get your third one 6 months later.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important point here is now we are months out from that vaccination. In that time, your immune system is evolving. It is creating antibodies and immune responses to those variants that we haven't even seen. When you get that booster dose, we see really good evidence now. Several journal articles published in the last couple weeks about this. We see that those Omicron specific antibodies do get boosted and do get to high neutralizing antibody levels. So it is very important to get that third dose. A lot of it has to do, again, with the time from that second dose of the vaccine where your immune system can evolve and create those different antibodies and T-cell responses.
Thomas and Holly, it's not very often that we get a chance to hear from someone who is willing to come on and say that they changed their mind. Mm-hmm. And so I have to take advantage of this moment for you to be able to share with others your message that it's okay to say we had our doubts, we learned more, we listened, we asked questions, we grew in our knowledge, and now we're in a different place. And maybe there are people out there who may not feel comfortable saying, well, I felt one way 1 minute, and now I'm flipping and I'm feeling a different way. And I'm so glad you guys did. But talk about your message to those who've been in your shoes.
Yeah, I mean, being in the hospital and seeing, after I was awake, of course, and seeing all the patients and, all the nurses that are running their tails off and all the doctors that came in and are like, you have to get vaccinated. You have asthma, you have all of this working against you as well. So and you're pregnant too. And so, of course, he comes first. So I want him to be as healthy as possible. So that's why I decided to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
Thomas?
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I want to hear your message as well, please.
Yeah, so I will say, it was very eye-opening, and talking about people, not wanting to admit they're wrong or not wanting to say that they didn't make the best decision first time. I understand that. This is not something that you can afford to continue to do that, though, and let it be a level of ignorance for it. You don't want, I just want to make sure that Holly and Henry are okay, and I would do anything to do that. And you make your decision based off of the information that you have at the time, and that can change. And the idea that it can't is really dangerous to you. And, through some of these photos that you're showing, there's one where I'm all masked up in the room with her. And I thought that right there was going to be the last moment that I was going to see her, because they were literally getting ready to take her out of the room to do an emergency C-section on her. But there was another mom that was having that done already, and they were preparing to do it in the room. They had her marked and everything, and they had told me all the risks. I mean, at that point, she was only just over 23 weeks pregnant, and they were pretty certain that the expectancy for Henry was not good, and if he did make it, there were going to be a lot of complications at that point, because that's very early in the pregnancy. But I thought that I was either going to lose her or both of them because of the situation that she was going through at the time. And if there's anybody out there, if you see, news or anything, and you think that COVID's not that serious and that hospitalization numbers are not serious, I would challenge you, if you were able to, which you can't, but to be in a COVID ICU, because I saw many people that were worse off than Holly, which didn't seem so at the time to me, but it's no joke.
It's no joke.
It is no joke, and I wish we could get everyone to believe, with Thomas and Holly, because it is astonishing to me that we're still fighting the fight. That people still believe in ivermectin, they still believe in all this other baloney, and you sit back and you look at that and you're like, why would Hawkeye, why would we spend so much time on this? I don't know about you, but I was supposed to have a few days off over the holidays, and I didn't have any time off because we worked on COVID the entire time and every day, and there was something that would pop up, and I think, and it's easy to be me because I'm not sick and I'm not these guys who've had to experience it, but the reality is that healthcare workers are exhausted taking care of people who don't want to get vaccinated. Because at the end of the day, this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. If you're vaccinated, our hospitalization numbers wouldn't be 108; they would be 4. And you know what? And we just have to. We're going to have to get used to it. I was listening to a New England Journal of Medicine podcast today, Hawk, and they're talking about how this is no really longer. It's not really a pandemic as much as it's an endemic virus now. We have to get used to it, and the way to get used to it, and the way to get treated for it, is to go ahead and get vaccinated. Because, again, that would take our hospitalizations from 108 to right now we'd have 2 or 4 patients. And you know what? That's just not the same.
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely comments, statements, and narrative that is pushed by things that are not reality. And we have to also understand, 1 in 400 now Americans has died. Is that about the...
And over 1 in 100, those over 65 have now succumbed to COVID. And guys, I'm going to be getting into closer and closer to 65 this month, and I just should not be the one that's going to be in those numbers. I'd rather stay on the other side of that curve, and the way we stay on the other side of the curve is to be vaccinated.
So it's it continues to be a misinformation campaign. If you say something loud enough and long enough, people will believe it, but that is not the truth. Those statements, that misinformation is not supported anything by the facts, but what is supported is, just as you said, now we are moving into a state of endemicity. It is endemic. It will be with us. I don't think the seasons are going to matter. So what you have to do individually is protect yourself, protect your bubble and your family, and the way to do that is through vaccination. We are continuing to see that. That will become more and more evident as time goes on. We know vaccinations are extremely safe. The benefits they offer significantly outweigh any risks at all. So getting down, getting to protect your individual bubble is the best thing that you can do. But also, Steve, it will allow you to have a reduced risk of hospitalization so you can go back to work, so we can keep the economy moving. That's important for people too, so we can keep doing those things that we want. And when you are fully vaccinated, you have that booster, we know that you are going to have that maximal protection against going to the hospital.
Thomas and Holly, I know we talked about this a little bit about socially, some of the issues that maybe you would have dealt with when you do change your mind about getting vaccinated. Have your family and friends been supportive? What have those conversations been like among family and friends?
I'll tell you what, any of our family members that weren't vaccinated at the time, that at least were close in keeping up in the story, pretty much the night that Holly got put on the ventilator, they went and got vaccinated within the next day or two. And that's very good. I hate that it was in that circumstance, but their main concern, with my mom, was, being around for her grandkids, being around for her kids, and being able to see us too, especially in that kind of situation.
Yeah,
that's true.
Sorry.
No, please, Holly, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say my mom actually got COVID. She's in Texas, though, so this isn't really related to us or anything. But she's actually going to get vaccinated, too. But she got the antibody treatment, so she has to wait just a little bit. But she's going to be getting vaccinated as well.
But your story is what caused a lot of people surrounding you to get vaccinated.
Yes, absolutely.
And when we talk about what our thoughts were before. I don't know, Holly's personally, but mine were just distrust in government and pharma kind of thing, which I feel is what a lot of people's are. There's the speculation that some people believe tracking chips and stuff, which is just crazy to me, which, may not be to other people. But you just need to reevaluate. And I tell you what, if you could have seen the inside of some of these COVID ICUs and you look at these numbers, which are real numbers, then you would feel different on making sure that didn't happen to a family member of yours. And if you could do anything to change it, you would, because you can't make your decision on this based off of your political stance or, what you see through social media. The people in hospitals, the reason that I definitely got vaccinated was not just because I saw this, but because all the healthcare workers at KU that I talked to that believe so strongly in it. And these were the people that were taking care of the two most important people in my life every day, and how happy they were when she decided that she was going to get vaccinated while we were still there, and how happy her nurse was that day to be the one giving her the shot.
I have to say, Dr. Seitz, and just listening to them, I wish there were more people like that, because the leap I feel like Holly and Thomas made is not easy to get to, from where they believed to where they are now. But I love that they brought up the healthcare workers.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's perfect. The nurse giving the shot and how bad people are, because these are the folks who are really at the front lines.
Right.
The docs, we sort of parachute in and parachute out, but the nursing staff and the respiratory therapy staff are the ones taking the biggest risks. They're in the room all the time, every day.
But they're seeing the big picture. It's not just, I know Holly, the baby number one, but to see the big picture of the hospital, the other families that are being affected by it, and to really just sit back and look at some of those theories that went around, and the rumors and the hoax and all the things that go around.
Well, let me ask these guys. So, guys, what would you say? What do you say today now when people talk to you? They're still vaccine hesitant or doubters, or to your point, they didn't believe in government or pharmaceuticals. What do you say to them now? Because there's still a significant number of folks out there like that.
Sure, I would say, I still value that it should be people's choice, but I think that your choice is very strong. It could affect, other people around you, but really you. And the data that, not only medical experts, but the hospital specifically. I love that you guys do this morning medical update, because it's not just an article from,
A biased magazine.
Yeah, like a biased magazine, or from News Network. It's the numbers that you're dealing with. And you got to make the decision that's best for you. And I believe predominantly that for everybody, that is to get vaccinated, to lessen the, risks that you could have and the complications that you could have if you do get COVID. I don't believe that it keeps you from getting COVID, obviously, but obviously with the numbers, it keeps you from getting more severe. And that's the goal here. Because with COVID and the virus that SARS, the whole thing is especially respiratory issues, lung damage, and Holly has asthma and we're pregnant, which gives you two very hard indicators already that you're possibly going to have complications if you get it bad. And if you can prevent that, give yourself the antibodies to help fight that. That's very important.
Yeah, he's exactly right. And the only thing I would say is that the vaccines, there's good data that the vaccines are about 5 to 6 times for the Delta variant and the prior variants. We don't know about Omicron. You're 5 to 6 times less likely to get the virus at all. But it's 12 or 13 times less likely to die from the virus. So those are huge differences, really. Omicron, you may be having an easier time getting infected, but again, you're still protected against severe hospitalization and death, which was always the point of the vaccination. I think we all got onto the bandwagon early on because it did appear that that you could even limit the spread significantly with the original strain, but with the Delta variant, with Omicron, that's not as true. It's still 5 or 6 times less likely with the Delta variant, but it's really that protection against hospitalization and death that makes all the difference.
Now, Thomas, I know when you had COVID, you had really mild symptoms. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I felt terrible, but other than that, I really just had the kind of light upper cough that a lot of people have, and I felt feverish at night. During the day, I'd say I felt almost 100% most days. And then at night, I'd really crash and start to feel bad. There was one point where I almost thought about asking Holly to take me to the ER just because I felt like I was struggling to breathe. However, I'm typically pretty conservative in when I go to the doctor or not. And so I held off on it. And thankfully, I made it okay because it could have, even with me having fairly mild symptoms other than that, just the cough and the fever, it could have gotten worse, and so I'm thankful.
So Holly, you're struggling with your voice, some kidney issues, asthma. How are you just feeling day to day? And on top of that, you're pregnant. So
Yeah.
And you're in that stage where you're not sleeping.
right.
Yeah, I'm getting stronger. I can do more, it seems like, each day. But I'm still trying to take it easy just because my lungs and, everything that they've been through. And of course, my voice, trying to rest that as much as I can too. But I feel pretty good now. It's been a little bit, so I'm getting there.
So Holly, is there still a food you crave?
I really crave Funyun chips right now.
Oh, yes.
All right. And so Thomas, is it your job to go get those? Because when my wife was pregnant, I had to go get strawberry sundaes at midnight.
Absolutely. When she was gone in the hospital, we spent 2 weeks out of the house, so I trashed everything that we had before I drove up to Kansas City.
We didn't even get to have Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we didn't even get to have Thanksgiving before, and so we had a little bit of a Thanksgiving once we got back finally. But it's my job to make sure that we're stocked up with everything.
Funyuns, that's the perfect pregnancy food. I love that. Good choice, Holly. I could tell Thomas is taking very good care of you in all ways. So we do have some questions. I want to get to our community questions. And I am just going to, Ashley has a question, Holly, for you. Just curious about when you came off the ventilator. What do you remember about that? What kind of questions did you have? What was Thomas telling you?
So I didn't see Thomas until I was in labor delivery area.
Yeah, it was the day after she came off the ventilator.
I was still a little sedated. I don't remember really saying anything because I was really hoarse. I was trying to talk on the video chat with them once I got it out. But they're just like, don't try to talk or anything. I was told I was at KU by the nurses. But I just remember trying to wave my hands at people. And yeah, it was.
She said the first thing she asked them for was a Coke.
It was a Coke, yeah.
A Coke?
Yep.
Well, this is good ICU care because she doesn't remember anything. That's exactly the way you want to be coming out of the ICU. You don't want to remember that. ICU amnesia. That's a good thing.
That's part of those critical drugs.
Part of the drugs,
They put her on the ventilator here in Wichita. And so she was here when we took her up there originally. She was in their labor and delivery area, just on oxygen. Later that night, they put her on BiPAP to help her breathe more. And the next day that she got put on a ventilator, which she didn't really know about. She just remembers, struggling to breathe and them coming in and sedating her. And they called me about 11:45 at night, and I woke up and told me that they were putting her on a ventilator. And she spent a couple days in Wichita before they decided that she was going to be flown up to KU. And their purpose for that was, evaluating her for ECMO, because we didn't have enough coverage here in Wichita for that. And that's a very scary thing when they explain that to you, as a spouse with your wife and your child already dealing with this. So if people don't understand that that's a very, intrusive kind of treatment, and that it takes a lot out of you, it's a big deal. And that's what's happening to some people. And so they flew her up there. She flew on a plane. It was, I got a chance to say goodbye to her. I video called her mom and her sister so that we could say some things as she got loaded into the ambulance. And they took her up to Kansas City. And I'm just so glad. I'm so thankful that she was there. She's just in the right spot to be able to turn around, because it was very scary.
So, Dr. Seitz, once a husband gets a call at night and says that their wife has to be put on a ventilator, is that you have no choice? There's no going back from there, right?
No, there really isn't. That's a scary situation, especially in this day and time when it's hard to be in the hospital. It's hard to be a visitor, and so when we put people on, I see a physician here for many years, and that's the call you don't want to have to make. The one late at night, and somebody's remote, and there are a lot of high stakes here because you have both mom and baby, and then you're saying, hey, listen, things aren't going so well, and so we're going to have to put you on life support. And when we do that, we get a little worried about how this is going to go. Those are the kind of catchphrases, the turn of phrase we use to say, we're not sure you're going to survive. And just try to paint the pictures honestly and tell the truth as best you can, because that's what families need. You just got to be honest and tell the truth and stuff like that so they can be coping with it. And then the good news is that you'll just not meet them. Well, there's a lot of dedicated groups of nursing and so respiratory therapy and support team, but that the teams in the ICU are just remarkable folks, and they work really hard, and they stay with you the whole night, whether you're in Wichita, Kansas City, wherever you may be. Those ICU teams are just outstanding, and so but it's a scary call. It's really about that honesty and truthfulness, and then trying to get people to always still yet have a little bit of hope. And for Holly in this case, it would have meant coming to Kansas City and with the possibility of having to go on ECMO. ECMO means we're going to support your heart and lungs with a machine because your lungs can no longer exchange oxygen. So now we're going to help you by getting you more oxygen into your bloodstream and taking away the bad stuff. And we use that sometimes while people are waiting for heart transplants, but in this situation, it's really used to help the lungs rest a little bit. Just glad you didn't have to get on that, because that would have been really hard for Henry to survive. So,
but Dr. Seitz, we talk about people who are unvaccinated not doing well. Their chances of survival once they go on the ventilator are so low.
Really
so,
low.
And let us not forget, Holly was not vaccinated at the time, and she's pregnant. So, is this nothing short of a miracle? What would pull somebody out of a state like that?
So Hawk, I think our current survival once you go on the ventilator is about, the mortality rate runs around 30 or 40%. So about 50 or 60% of people will survive. Okay. So that's still, think about that. That's bad, right? That's bad. If we say, hey, if you're on a ventilator, you have a 4 out of 10 chance you're not going to survive that, or 2 out of 5. That's not good. And yet how we said at the top of the program, therapies have saved lives if they're given up front and early. But once you hit a ventilator, it's really not the virus per se. It's the inflammation from the virus. Hawk, that's a lot harder to turn off. And we're not better at that than we were 2 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. It's due to that inflammatory stage where you have either that cytokine storm, if we've heard, just that overall inflammatory stage that's really kind of clogging up the lungs, really making it difficult for that oxygen and that CO2 to have that good air and gas exchange. So that's the real problem. There's not a lot that Paxlovid, Remdesivir, any of those treatments really can do at that point, because you are further into it. You've entered the inflammatory stage, and really it's about getting oxygen to your tissues, and that's really what is inhibited by that stage.
And you just have to hope your body's going to turn that inflammation back off again. And if the body can turn it off early enough, And sometimes we can help a little bit. We give the blood clot stuff, the remdesivir, we give some steroids. But at the end of the day, your body has to turn off the inflammation. And the key is, does it turn it off before there's too much scarring to your lung? Once there's a lot of scarring in the lung, even when you turn it off, things don't go so well. And those are the folks who don't survive. Fortunately for Holly, it sounds like you got a little bit of damage to your kidneys, a little bit of damage to your lungs, but some of that in the long run can be recoverable or pretty manageable. And you're sitting there, you're not on oxygen, you think feel like you're getting better. That's a really good prognostic sign, I mean, for how well you're going to do in the long run, especially if you said you're 36 weeks pregnant, right? So this is what we call a hard pregnancy right here.
Yeah.
So clear this up for Gene. He has heard that your immune system can get fatigued from vaccination and that vaccinated people are more likely to get Omicron. Is there any truth to that?
Oh, God,
Just
no,
clear it up.
Guy, how do we stop that rumor?
No, again, I think that's more of a story or an opinion.
I got it. We're going to live long and prosper.
Yeah.
We're going to vaccinate against misinformation. That's what we're going to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's again, another comment that really is unsupported by science, and it's just really not understanding the immune system. As we said really early on when people were concerned about masks, your body comes into contact with foreign substances, with pathogens every day, and so you are continually sampling things, whether it's in the environment that you're breathing, going through your lungs, depending what you ingest. And again, what you ingest every day is probably much more harmful components than any vaccine as well. So that is not true.
All right, Claudia, thanks for joining us on YouTube this morning. I have to ask you this question.
Please.
Do you think mask mandates should be reinstated?
Well, here's what I think. I think everybody should be masking, and here's why. If you want to keep schools open and you want to keep businesses open, you got to keep people healthy. You're either not going to have enough teachers or enough staff or too many students out in this Omicron wave to think that you're going to really have successful schools, in my opinion, or the businesses are going to be able to work if they don't have enough employees. So to me, if you go inside public places, you ought to have a mask on. Do I think a mask mandate's required? It shouldn't be required. We ought to have common sense ought to be required. But, I favor people masking in all public spaces because that's the only way to keep all of us safe. What we know from the South African and early indications of the European data are that this Omicron wave is going to come smashing through, be really bad, and then it's going to drop off almost as fast as it did. That's what we're hoping for. So it may be that by the middle of February, this has calmed down a lot. With these new therapies, with remdesivir as outpatient, with monoclonal as an outpatient, with Paxlovid, molnupiravir, we are on the crest of having real meaningful therapies as an outpatient that'll be really important. And I think the key is that if we could just get people to follow the rules of infection control, we can get through this, Hawkeye, and not have to worry. But in the meantime, if people aren't going to follow the rules, then schools aren't going to be successful and businesses aren't going to be successful. So do I think we ought to have masking? You bet I do.
Yeah, especially in those high-risk places.
Shocker to anybody who ever
I think at school we have excellent data showing that there is a reduction in transmission and a mitigation in transmission within the schools. Even though we do understand people are probably getting it outside of the schools and bringing it in, you still have a lot of exposure to a lot of people in those schools. And we know that masking, and certainly if you can distance as much as possible, again, continue hand hygiene, all of those things help to reduce the actual spread within the school.
So I have a question from Amy. And I'm asking because I kind of want to know myself. But and we're going to have Children's Mercy on Thursday, so we'll dive more into kids and schools then. But would you send your kid, your vaccinated kid, into a mask optional school setting, especially if you have like younger kids at home that can't be vaccinated? And I'm asking this because are all these numbers that we're seeing in schools due to the masking optional situation, or is it still happening with, like my kids go to an all-mask school, but we're seeing higher cases. So
you're going to see higher cases wherever you are because Omicron's so darn transmissible, and they'll pick it up outside of the school. The problem is that if your teachers and your kids don't mask there and in any other public place they go to, right, then they're likely to get sick. And Omicron is so transmissible. There have been some pretty good case series. Now there's one in Nebraska and some others that the CDC is reporting on about how much more transmissible the Omicron variant is. And so when people get sick from that, then they can't be in school, the teachers can't be in school, and that's where the struggle is going to come. If people are masked not only in the school, but in other places where they are in public, then we'll slow down the transmission of it, and we'll keep businesses and schools staffed and open. That's how I look at the world, and I think and obviously if people are vaccinated, because it's clear, and we're hearing from our guests this morning how important it is. We just need to be vaccinated. We just need to follow the rules of infection control. They continue to travel with you. They continue to keep us safe wherever we go, whether it's school, the hospital, the business, or out to a gathering.
Yeah, I think it's what you want to prioritize, and we certainly recommend and understand that prioritization of keeping kids in school is extremely important. Giving them more safe places, giving them the school lunches, allowing them to socialize and learn in that optimal environment, which is not the environment at home when you're isolated in your room and doing lessons online. And I think the way to keep them in schools to help reduce the ability for children to have to stay home from quarantine or what that may be is to continue masking in schools.
Thomas and Holly, Kim was just asking, not to put you on the spot, but what other precautions are you taking? I know you're vaccinated. That is great. Are you going out? Are you masking? Are you staying in more? How are you staying safe?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely wearing a mask. Anytime we go to like the grocery store, or, if we go out to eat or something, which is not very often now that we've been home, we usually just kind of bring it home. But yeah, we definitely do masks.
Yeah, I wear a mask. It's hard with the beard, deforms it. But I wear a mask, wash your hands a lot. I wash my hands all the time. I use hand sanitizer all the time. I mean, I'm no doctor, but I think that washing your hands is a huge staple, not even just with COVID and not getting sick. Wash your hands often. Some people wear gloves. I guess unless you wear it all day or change them, whatever you can do. But wash your hands, wear a mask, don't touch your face, get vaccinated.
You sound like Dr. Hawkins said.
He does. I was thinking he should be an ID doc.
You've only said that a few hundred times. So yes,
although, I don't know, is that beard, that is one impressive beard. How long did it take you to grow that?
Well, this, I guess, is technically 2 years, but I've chopped off probably 5 inches. I didn't get to grow a beard for many years at all. I had to shave every day. So the day after I no longer worked there, started growing.
Henry, I know. I hope Henry likes the beard.
You better. Everybody tells me they can see Daddy's features in the sonograms, and I'm looking for the beard in them. I can't see it.
Yeah, right.
I love it.
That's impressive.
How are we doing on time? Can we do a couple more questions?
Yeah,
Dr.
a couple more. Then we
Stites and
got. Yeah, there we
Hawkinson?
go. Okay.
Okay, so Judy curious, we've talked about this before, but she said she may have missed it, but how do you know whether it's Delta or Omicron? It doesn't matter.
You really don't. Unless you want to get, there's a preponderance. If you lose your sense of taste or smell, you're more likely to have Delta. But beyond that, it's just hard to know from symptoms. Yeah. It's hard to distinguish rhinovirus, coronavirus, parainfluenza virus, influenza virus, and SARS-CoV-2 just based on symptoms alone, Hawkeye. That's why you got to get tested to find out.
Yeah. I mean, even for aborted, experienced individuals, it's very difficult to tell because a lot of those symptoms are the same. We know that you could lose your sense of smell and taste with other
common cold
infections
virus
as well. We do know what common cold viruses are spreading right now. We know influenza is spreading. But I think really symptomatology alone, you really can't make that inference. You can make an educated guess maybe based on a couple different things. But again, to be certain, you really need to get tested because a lot of them, especially if it's mild, will probably have the same.
They will, and in fact, you look at these websites down there, all out there. Like, oh, these doctors are going to tell you how to tell the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that guy, no, he doesn't.
And again, I think the
just
important thing to know is part in that question. The first one was, how do you know if it's Omicron or Delta? Again, I think really we haven't seen much difference, and I think really all these variants are the same. Again, there might be some variability. Maybe you have an increased risk of hospitalization one compared to the other, but we still know through the beginning there is a certain percentage who has a risk of hospitalization, severe disease, and death, but it could happen to anybody. And so really the ultimate goal, the ultimate message is to get vaccinated. That reduces your risk of having that hospitalization and severe disease.
I want to give the last question to Sally, and we will get to the rest of some of these questions throughout the week. How close is the hospital to implementing emergency protocols due to the overwhelming number of cases? Can we share details about what that does look like, or what that would look like?
Well, it's not really a question of implementing an emergency protocol per se, because this is a stepwise process. Now, there's crisis standards of care in which we triage people that we don't think we're going to survive, and we don't treat them as much. It's like a MASH unit. We are not at that level, and hopefully we will never be at that level. There was a time when we got up to over 225 patients hospitalized. We were probably getting closer to that, but we're not at that level. What we do have to do is that, we've had to kind of scale back on some elective surgeries in clinics and things like that. And as all hospitals in our area are having to take similar measures, because you got to keep your staff safe. You may not have quite enough people to be able to do all the work. So that's what we're looking at, and having those conversations, because and I think what we have to remember is that COVID-19, when you're unvaccinated, just doesn't affect the unvaccinated. It affects everyone, because it takes the hospitalizations and it fills up the hospitals so much, and staff gets so sick that it means we don't have enough people here to take care of everybody, which means we have to scale things back. And that's the level we're all at. That's the level, you see that crisis arising throughout the United States. Maybe tomorrow we can show the heat, or Wednesday, I don't know, one of these days we'll show the heat maps again. But if you remember, for a while there wasn't a lot of purple on the hot spots, and now the whole Midwest, it's in the South, it's up in the Northeast, it's out in the West, it's everywhere are hot spots. And so we're all experiencing the same difficulty. And what that means is that we don't have enough staff, and we have too many patients, and so we're all having to make changes on our daily workflow. Let's say canceling some surgeries, rolling back clinics, trying to divert nursing and other staff over to testing stations, vaccination clinics, things like that, because we have to get our work done. We have to take care of these really sick folks. So are we near crisis standards of care? No, we're still a ways from that. Let's please stay away. And I think an 83% vaccination rate throughout the U.S. will help with that. But this is still the pandemic of the unvaccinated, and that's the folks who are coming in the hospital. So the number one thing people can do for us out there, put on a mask and get your vaccine.
All right, I'm going to get to some final thoughts. I know your thoughts are never final, but I'll get to you in a second. I'm going to start with Holly and Thomas. Thank you so much for being with us today, sharing your message. We appreciate just your candor and everything that you've shared with us today. So what is your message to those who are unvaccinated? What do you want to leave us with today? I want to hear from both of you.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before when we talked, you definitely don't want to be in this situation. Almost losing our baby and myself, it's really scary. So if getting vaccinated and taking that extra step is what needed, I think you should really consider it, because it could save your life.
I totally agree with that. I'd say one, go get vaccinated, because it can save your life. If you feel sick, go get tested at like a local testing center.
Absolutely.
Because when you get bad enough, if you do, that you need to go to the hospital, with how many people are going to the emergency room right now. I mean, here, it was a 6-hour wait on the best day when we went. And you may not, that puts a lot of people off when they show up at the ER and it's that long of a wait and they go home and they get worse. But don't be in this situation. Do anything that you can to prevent it. Wear your mask, wash your hands, get vaccinated. Make sure you get tested when you're sick, because I may be keeping it together now really well, but I promise you that 2 weeks ago and a month ago, when all of this was occurring, I was not doing well. And I don't ever want to see anybody else in that situation, because I saw other families that had worse outcomes than me. And I was losing my mind. I didn't think it could be any worse than what I was at. And you don't want to be that way. You don't want to be in that position. And don't let opinions you've developed, or political opinions, or, just what you've learned throughout your life be what makes your decision here. This is different. If people are worried about the vaccine being rushed like I was, a lot of people had that opinion that because of the emergency use authorization that it was rushed along. Technology is way different nowadays than it was, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even 2 years ago. it's very different. You can't compare this to any other previous pandemic that people do in the early 1900s or mid, anywhere, because things are different. And we have a lot easier access to information now. Medical networks, hospitals, they share information easier. This is the right decision to make, is to go get vaccinated and take care of yourself and your family so that you can be there for them.
Another huge thank you to both of you. We appreciate you sharing your story. I have a feeling we're going to have you back on. In fact, when's the due date? When does Henry get here?
It was March 30th. Now we're looking at the beginning of March, and we're hoping we could still do late March, but we'll see. It's just kind of evolving. We go for weekly scans now, and we'll see.
Okay. Well, please keep us posted. I'm going to be bugging you, wanting my updates, and we'll have you back on because we want to meet baby Henry, and we're just so glad that both of you are healthy. Thank you again.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Dr. Hawkinson, your final thoughts
Yeah,
today.
how can I do anything more than just echo what our guests have said? Such a great message. Everybody take that to heart. Please, we just saw Dr. Fauci say that the impact of Omicron is going to be best measured by hospitalization. Steve, we've been saying that. Hospitalizations will be a bellwether rather than cases for really determining the impact and how we are doing as a community, as a nation. So the most important thing, to echo our guests, please get vaccinated. It's going to reduce your risk of going to the hospital, going to the ICU, and getting on the ventilator.
Sir?
Yesterday I watched the Chiefs game and I was so mad afterwards. I turned it off and I was frustrated. And,
Shocker.
he dropped a couple of passes again, and the referees, I don't know what planet they were on or what game they were watching. They were like the third team in the game, just throwing the flag so much, and always against the Chiefs, it seemed like. But at the end of the day, after that, I could go out and turn off the TV. My wife said, "What are you doing down there?" So I'm just calming down. So she took me out. We went out for a walk, and I had some nice dinner and worked out and all sorts of stuff. Did some work last night. At the end of the day, my life went on. Holly and Thomas, you guys have told a great story today. You've told the truth. COVID doesn't let your life go on, but you can stop that. You can stop and let your life go on. It's going to be different. We're going to get back to more of a normal. But how do you make sure that you can stay healthy and stay so you can just kind of turn it off and do what you want? You just get vaccinated. If you do that, you're going to be safe. And I think the testimony that Holly and Thomas have given today is the best we could have ever had. So thank you for being on the program. And we're not calling any penalties on you all at all. That was awesome.
Yeah, I'm a Cowboys fan, so.
Oh, boy.
Cowboys? Oh, I don't know if you can come back.
Thomas, no. No. You're still welcome back. The only Cowboy fan welcome back.
You are welcome back.
We're just trying to get around here.
We're a little red.
Thank you both. All right. And thank you all for being with us today. We're so glad you're back with us. Coming up tomorrow, as students head back to the class from winter break, we are diving deeper into how schools are handling Omicron and the lifting of mask mandates, what the numbers tell us, what officials have learned, and what they predict the new normal at school will look like moving forward. We're going to be joined by the superintendent of Shawnee Mission School District, as well as executive director of Cooperating School Districts of Greater Kansas City. We will have a lot to cover. Dr. Stites, are you back?
I'm actually in clinic tomorrow morning. No.
All right, we'll see you Wednesday.
You'll see
We're
me
getting you ready for
Wednesday,
Wednesday.
though. Yep.
We will have a lot to cover tomorrow. We'll see you at 8 a.m.
Subscribe to our morning medical update and open mics with Dr. Stites podcasts. Now everywhere podcasts are available.